All right, buckle up, everybody. This is a big day with a lot of information in it. Welcome to the Drew Allen Show. This is, of course, Drew Allen, your millennial minister of truth. Look, I want to talk about the Trump-Russia collusion hoax, but the first thing you need to understand, and there's so much to talk about, and there's so much depth that honestly we need to get into. I decided to break this up into 2 episodes. So think of it this way: with Trump-Russia collusion, you have before Trump won the presidency, right? And then you have after Trump won the election. That's how you need to look at this. Now, a lot of the Tulsi Gabbard stuff, a lot of the breaking news out there, some of it's breaking, some of it's not, but it is a very big deal nonetheless. This is really focused on Obama's role in December and afterwards. This is about how Trump-Russia collusion was used to undermine the will of the American people. And we're going to get there, and I will do that probably in the next episode. I'll touch on it at the end today. I'm just going to barrel through, but at a pace where hopefully, we can all glean what we need to from this. So just think of it in terms of that. You have before he was elected and after he was elected. Now, I want to start with the premise of Trump-Russia collusion because, we've got to go and take a trip back down memory lane, many of us, right? 2016 was not yesterday. It was quite a ways away in the past. And I knew that Trump-Russia collusion was a hoax. I knew it was a hoax from the very start. I knew it in 2016. And I will explain to you exactly why and how I knew that. To push the Russia hoax, one detail, right? One detail, ask yourselves what it is. One detail was absolutely necessary in furthering it. One thing absolutely had to be true, right? Or the entire hoax would fall apart. It had to be true, what? That Putin wanted Donald Trump to beat Hillary Clinton. If Putin didn't have a motive to beat Hillary Clinton, if Putin didn't have a motive to help Trump, then this hoax would fall apart. The hoax would end. It could not go any further. So just keep that in your mind. And you see, that's the poisonous little seed from which the Trump-Russia collusion hoax was born. And I've got my own bombshell I'll introduce to you when we get through this because I've never heard anybody talk about it. And it's pretty astonishing when you look at the timeline. There are some very important questions we need to ask. So the focus here is before Trump was elected. Now, like I said, I'll get into that intelligence report in a little bit. Now, the accepted knowledge out there in this is that, the Russians and Putin, one, were behind it. But for the sake of this conversation, let's just assume that that's correct. Let's just assume that it was, in fact, the Russians. It wasn't Seth Rich. Let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that the Russians were behind this. But the accepted point is that they hacked the DNC because, they didn't want Hillary Clinton to win. No. They hacked the DNC because they thought that Hillary was going to win. There's a big distinction there. And what I'm telling you is closer to the truth. But anyway, the entire premise of this hoax, right? That Vladimir Putin was desperate for Donald Trump to win the election. That is that entire premise was never founded on truth. That hoax was never credible because that was the claim. Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, and this is why we're going to go back in history a little bit. Hillary Clinton and the Obama administration had been the most pro-Putin Democrats in decades. First off, it was the incoming Obama administration back in 2009, right? Wins the election, 2008, 2009, he's going to be inaugurated. January 20th, right? It's always when it happens. Well, it was the Obama administration that was coming in that said they were going to, reset, that they were going to improve relations with Russia. So are you scratching your head yet? Were you scratching your head in 2016 when they said, well, Vladimir Putin wants Donald Trump to win? Why would he want Donald Trump to win? It's Obama and Hillary Clinton who he's got dirt on. It's those people that he's, excuse me, I'm adjusting my back here. Okay. So, this is March 6th, 2009. So you've got the new Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, right? She travels over to Geneva to reset relations between the US and Russia, right? This is the big Obama initiative. In other words, what was the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton saying to Vladimir Putin and the Russians? Hey, we know there was tension under the previous Bush administration for 8 years. We know Republicans don't like you guys in Russia. We know those guys don't like communism. But Obama, I'm a Marxist, baby. I love communism. Hillary Clinton doesn't care. She just cares whoever pays her. So now it's different because we love communism. We love you, Putin. We want to show you that we're different. We are not hostile to Russia. So you remember that moment, Clinton? She's in Geneva. She presents Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov this symbolic, it was very theatrical, right? This symbolic red reset button to symbolize all of this. And I don't know if you remember this, but it was humiliating because the button underneath it in Russian was supposed to say reset on it in Russian. And whoever did the translation for Clinton's team, they got the word wrong. The button had the Russian word that translated to overload or overcharged, not reset. So they botched that from the beginning. Anyway, the next 8 years under Obama were a disaster. Foreign policy-wise, Putin took advantage of Obama every which way. He became more aggressive. Remember, he invaded and annexed Crimea, and Barack Obama was very soft on that. He did not get involved in the conflict, and in fact, he said he wasn't going to get involved in the conflict. So, Putin had never had it so good as he did under Obama and Clinton. But let's talk about Hillary Clinton specifically, because supposedly, right, the premise, Vladimir Putin didn't want Hillary Clinton to win. He was scared of her. Scared of her. Yeah, scared like Seth Rich. He was desperate to defeat Hillary Clinton, right? To help Trump win. Let's start with Uranium One, huh? Can we start there? Anyone remember Uranium One? I'm just going to give a simple, short version of this. But remember, we were told, even before all the stuff that came out with Gabbard, in 2016, Vladimir Putin wanted Trump to win. He wanted Trump to beat Hillary Clinton. So in 2010, you had the Russian state-owned energy company, Rosatom. It was actually a Russian nuclear agency. And they were seeking to acquire a controlling stake in Uranium One, 51%, right? So that'd be a controlling stake. So this was a Canadian mining company that controlled 20% of our American U.S. uranium production. So for obvious reasons, uranium being a national security resource, this deal required approval from the State Department and, the Committee to Foreign Investment in the United States. But this was a group that included 9 federal agencies. One of them, of course, was Clinton and the State Department. And Clinton, do you understand what I'm saying here with Uranium One? So you have the Russians, right? You have Putin, a Putin-controlled energy company that's trying to buy 20% of American, U.S. uranium production. And Russia's supposed to be an enemy. Well, Clinton had a clear conflict of interest with the Uranium One deal. Do you remember why? Because donors who were connected to Uranium One, they had contributed $145 million to the Clinton Foundation. Let me repeat that. Clinton at the State Department is supposed to be one of the people that approves this deal, selling 20% of our uranium production to the Russians through brokering the sale of Uranium One. And people that work for Uranium One who want this deal done, right? They want to make money. They want to sell to the Russians. Well, they have donated $145 million to the Clinton crime family via the Clinton Foundation. And Clinton never disclosed any of this, by the way. Now, at the time of this deal, the FBI, get this, it just keeps, this is amazing stuff. You see, in looking into the Trump-Russia collusion hoax, we are finally revisiting the real colossal epic corruption that exists in this country that was the Clinton family and even the Obamas. Now, at the time of this deal, right? The Russians trying to buy a majority stake in Uranium One. The FBI had evidence of bribery, of kickbacks, and corruption tied to Rosatom, which is the Putin Russian state-owned energy company that's trying to buy our uranium. So Rosatom had this subsidiary company that was called 10X. Vadim Makarin, I don't speak Russian, I don't know. Makarin, make it whatever, pronounce how you want. Vadim, I know that's right. Makarin, so he was involved in this racketeering scheme that the FBI was investigating. And he ran this subsidiary of Rosatom, 10X, in Maryland, I believe it was. Now, Robert Mueller, this is what's so amazing about this stuff. The names that always come back up, right? The same crooks are always in positions of power. So Robert Mueller, right, who would end up going and conducting the Mueller investigation, $32 million, 2 years of our money into Trump-Russia collusion. Robert Mueller is the FBI director, and he's the one who had built a criminal case starting in 2009 under Obama. So Robert Mueller's actually built a criminal case that exposes the corruption of Rosatom via their subsidiary 10X. He's the one leading the investigation into this Russian who's running the company in the U.S. And he kept this investigation secret. Nobody knew about this. No public action was even taken until 2014, which is 4 years after the Uranium One deal was approved. Now, the FBI knew that Rosatom's objective. Now, get this, because the FBI had an informant at 10X, which is a subsidiary of Rosatom. So when I talk about 10X, I'm talking about Rosatom. If I'm talking about Rosatom, I'm talking about 10X, just for the sake of making this simple to understand. So the FBI actually knew that Rosatom's objective was to gain control of the global uranium market. The FBI had the informant. His name was William Douglas Campbell. And he's the one who gave the FBI these documents. He gave them recordings. He gave them memos showing the corruption. He told the FBI, this informant, he told the FBI, he told Robert Mueller that Russia's goal was to gain influence in the U.S. through nuclear deals, including Uranium One. This is going on. So what did the Obama officials do? What did Hillary Clinton do? What did the FBI do? They all kept this information from Congress. They didn't share this with the other agencies that were supposed to approve the sale of our uranium production to the Russians. They hid the FBI report. It wasn't shared with them. So, in other words, Clinton's State Department approved a dangerous deal that handed Russia control of 20% of our uranium production, America's uranium production, while more than $100 million flowed to her family from people associated with the deal. She didn't disclose the donations. And meanwhile, evidence of corruption, related to Rosatom, that was buried. And just so you understand, Vadim Makarin, who ran the subsidiary of Rosatom in the United States, the Russian, he was arrested in 2014. He pled guilty to money laundering and bribery. All right. And the DOJ made this announcement quietly because there was very little media coverage of this because they didn't want to hurt Clinton. They didn't want to hurt the Obamas. But that's what happened. So it was all real. Now, on top of this, so again, excuse me, Hillary Clinton was effectively the reason that Vladimir Putin gained control of 20% of our uranium production. And he wants Trump to be president, not Hillary Clinton? Get the F out of here. So anyway, on top of all this, on June 29th of 2010, we're in 2010 here, Bill Clinton, I don't know if you remember this story, he was actually invited to the Kremlin. He was invited to Moscow by a Kremlin-linked investment bank, and that bank was called Renaissance Capital. But he was invited to Moscow to give a paid speech, and they paid him $500,000. And at the time that he delivered this speech, Bill Clinton, that is, and at the time that he got the $500,000, Renaissance Capital was actively promoting investment in Uranium One. That's right. So they were trying to broker. So the deal was going on. The Russians are trying to buy our uranium at the same time that the bank in Russia that is trying to raise the capital to get the deal done pays Bill Clinton $500,000 to give a speech. So, I could go on forever. Um, Obviously about Obama himself and how weak he was. Do you remember in Syria, you had Assad's forces use sarin gas on 1,000 plus people that included children? And remember, the Russians are also on the ground in Syria, right? And the Russians are bombing our. Look, I mean, this isn't about your opinion of Syria and our involvement. I'm just making a point to you, okay? The Russians are present in Syria, and they're backing our enemies, right? So we're backing rebels, and the Russians are on the other side of that war, and they're bombing the people that we're backing and putting guns in their hands of, and Obama takes no action. Obama's famous red line comment, hey, Assad, if you move chemical weapons, if you use chemical weapons, that's a red line and things are going to change. My calculus on this situation is going to change, i.e., watch out. And the very next day, Assad killed 1,000 plus people with chemical weapons. And Barack Obama then had the Russians negotiate a deal on our behalf. So now, before we continue on this journey together into the most scandalous and criminal behavior ever engaged in by an administration in our country's history, can I just interject for a second? Do the Trump weave for a moment. Imagine that George Washington is president of the United States. And, I don't know, Thomas Jefferson, his contemporaries who, let's say they were hungry for power themselves. And they went to our enemies in France and they went to our enemies in the UK and they worked with whatever the, intel agency would be at the time. Obviously, it's a different time. It's not exactly a perfect analogy. And they accused, George Washington of working with, the French to, undermine our country or to, it's treasonous. I'll come up with a better analogy, but I think you get the point. If you put someone else in there and you think about what did Obama and Clinton actually do? And this is the point. They didn't just use our intel agencies to create this hoax. They actually worked with foreign intelligence operations to carry this out. But I've got to remind you about Benghazi. Do you realize that if Benghazi hadn't happened, we probably wouldn't have had the Trump-Russia collusion hoax? Because it was in the Benghazi investigations, right? Because Hillary Clinton and her State Department failed to deliver resources to protect our Americans at the embassy. They didn't take the threat seriously. And the whole reason, it became a scandal is the Clinton and the State Department were trying to cover up the fact that they were responsible for these deaths because they didn't heed the warnings of the ambassador and of the security forces there that for a month were saying, hey, it's a dangerous situation. It's volatile here. There's more and more armed militias they're forming here. We don't feel safe. And they didn't take the threat seriously. And obviously we know what happened. Ambassador Stevens died. Other special forces, I think 4 people died there. And then you had Hillary Clinton blame it on, some random video somebody posted mocking Muhammad. And the reason they did that, I don't think people understand this about Benghazi. I didn't understand this until I was doing the research, by the way. I really never understood the nuts and bolts of the Benghazi scandal. I didn't really understand. I thought the video that Obama went out and, all these people were saying, oh yeah, it was a video. Why were they blaming it on a video? Why did they put this person in prison over this video that obviously they were lying? It had nothing to do with Benghazi. It was not, and this is why. Because the use of the video was to claim that this was happened all of a sudden. There was a spontaneous event. And the reason the State Department and Clinton and Obama wanted you to believe that what happened in Benghazi was a spontaneous event is because it absolved them of their role in not planning. If it was spontaneous, how could Hillary Clinton have known that they needed additional security in Benghazi, right? If it was spontaneous and nobody saw it coming, then Hillary Clinton couldn't have failed to send more people and to secure our Americans that were stationed there, because nobody could have known. That's why they did the video. I felt like a genius when I finally figured it out like 2 days ago. Maybe some of you already knew that, but I'm 38 now. I was a little bit younger back then when it happened, and my political acumen has raised since then, paying attention to things like many of yours, I'm sure too. But anyway, so that's the deal. That's why they blamed on the video, because you looked at the emails with Hillary Clinton, and she was told about this, and she didn't take action. So she is directly responsible for the deaths of all these people in Benghazi. It was totally irresponsible. It was a total failure on behalf of the State Department and Hillary Clinton. And when that was investigated, that's when we discovered that she used a personal email and a private server. This is another thing that I think is somewhat confusing to people at times. Like, I have a Gmail account, right? So I use a private server because it's attached to my Gmail account. That's what facilitates the email exchange. So that's all we're talking about with the server. All right. She's using a personal email address. It's not protected by the State Department. Hillary Clinton used her personal email address. She never used a State Department, never used a government address, even in her role as the head of the State Department. She used a personal email address to conduct all of her correspondence. Think about that for a second. And we know why she did that. Because if you use a government email address, you're required to store those emails. That's government property, so they can see into what you're doing. And so, she decided to just use a personal email address for everything. And it was out of the Benghazi investigation that we learned that she was doing this. That we learned that she was using this personal email address, that we learned that she was sending classified information. That's what sparked all this. And this is the situation Hillary Clinton found herself in January of 2016. The email scandal was not relenting. She was still under a microscope. She was still humiliated. The FBI was investigating her emails. James Comey was investigating her emails. She is embroiled in a massive, massive scandal as she is competing with Bernie Sanders to win the nomination for president, for Democrat presidential candidate in 2016. You have to understand the context of all of this, of what is going on. Now, look, the way this DNC hack that took place was framed, that's what we have to look at, right? This is the beginning of 2016 as well. And bear with me as I give you a couple dates. I might have to bounce around for a second, but most people are really familiar with a John Podesta, right? He was the campaign manager at the time with a John Podesta hack. Now, supposedly, the way this story was given to us by the media, and there's a reason I'm going to keep bringing up what we've been told, because I want to question everything in just a few minutes. But it was supposedly March 19th, 2016, when Podesta received an email that looked like a Google security alert. You know the type of email. Someone has tried to access your account, change your password immediately by clicking here. And I think there might even be email correspondence, but somebody in the Clinton campaign or at the DNC told Podesta to go ahead and click on it, and he clicked on it. And it was a malicious link that sent him to a fake Google login page, and he put in his credentials, and that's how they accessed his emails. Now, I don't know how relevant that it will be later on, but just keep that in mind. This is happening in April. So, that was March, right? March 19th. So the Democrat National Committee hired CrowdStrike in April. The end of April actually was April 30th to look into it and protect the system. So basically, at the end of April, the DNC says, "Hey, we've got a problem. We're being hacked." But, I don't understand how you go from March 19th with this, phishing attempt that's successful with Podesta. It then takes you over a month to hire somebody to look into it. I mean, that's just kind of odd to me. I mean, aren't those questions that you are curious about? Anyway, CrowdStrike ultimately said it was the Russians. It was the Russians. That's what they concluded at the end of their investigative work. And the DNC waited until mid-June to tell everyone what had happened. So they knew in May at the latest that, I think, CrowdStrike, I've got some information from them too, because they put out statements on this too. But the Democrats waited until mid-June to let everyone know that they'd been hacked. And it wasn't presented as a big deal at first, by the way. One of the things I did as I was looking into all this is I went back and I looked at what the media was saying at the time, week by week. And so you've got, the Washington Post, I believe, broke the story that the DNC had been hacked. And that was on June 14th, 2016. And here are a couple points from that article. Russia hacking was nothing new. It was routine. It was well known. Everyone knows that the Russians do this. So it wasn't particularly, revelatory. And I've got some pull quotes from Politico, who wrote about it at the time. And Politico said, just a couple things here. Russian hackers have long served as a major digital foil for the Obama administration. Last August, Defense Department officials blamed Moscow for orchestrating a successful cyber attack on the Pentagon Joint Chiefs unclassified email system. The incident came just months after Defense Secretary Ash Carter acknowledged Russian hackers had broken into the DoD's unclassified networks. So they're admitting now, without really intending to, that the Russians have been targeting the Obama administration for a long time. Last August of 2015, the Putin targeted the Pentagon Joint Chiefs unclassified email system. And we're going to jump in just a moment to Donald Trump is working with Putin to hack and steal and interfere in the election. Donald Trump, nobody knew that Donald Trump was going to be the Republican candidate for president in August of 2015 when this hacking was going on. So why is Russia trying to hack into the Pentagon? Did Trump have them do that too? Do you understand what I'm getting at? You have to turn off your brain completely to buy the stupidity of these individuals like Dara O'Rourke, I can see on the screen. Load of bollocks. Tulsi is as mad as a box of frogs. I don't know why Dara's even watching. I mean, she could learn something. But, this is the type of person the Democrats rely upon to perpetuate their hoaxes, people that don't have brains like Dara O'Rourke. Hi, Dara. So in this Politico article, another just pull quote, Michael McFaul, who served as U.S. ambassador to Russia from 2012 to 2014, called the hack meddling in our personal affairs. I am sure they intended to do this without being caught, he told Politico. They wanted to obtain the information without it being detected. That's a kind of target that would make sense in terms of them wanting to know things about what is going on here. Whether they were doing it to try to manipulate our political process, I'd have to think about that. So this is the reporting throughout June. Now, the email scandal is still going on with Hillary Clinton. And now there are a few critical moments in this timeline. And we're about to hit one. June 27th, 2016. Bill Clinton meets with the Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, on the tarmac. I forget what city they were in, if it was Phoenix or wherever. But you remember this story? I mean, I won't go down, the rabbit hole, but, Christopher Sign, who worked for ABC, he's the one who broke the story. And of course, he was found dead years later. But they were supposed to be meeting in secret, and this guy saw them on the tarmac. He saw Loretta Lynch, going into the plane, meeting with Bill Clinton. This is weird. They just happen to be here, crossing paths, and they're having this private meeting. Well, what were they meeting about? Because Hillary Clinton was being briefed all along about given updates by the FBI on her investigation. Hillary Clinton was working with the Obama administration and Loretta Lynch, who ran the AG, she's the Attorney General, to figure out how she's going to get out of this unscathed. Because it's unfortunate that the year that she finally gets a shot at, actually winning the, Democrat nomination and becoming president, her dreams of power fulfilled, well, she's got the email scandal to deal with. And this is why later on, one of the things that Putin allegedly, from Tulsi Gabbard's report, what we just saw, that they held back, that they didn't even release via WikiLeaks or anything else, was that Hillary Clinton throughout this entire year was loaded up on tranquilizers. She was a mental wreck. She was a lunatic. And this corroborates something. She doesn't do she doesn't meet with the press. She doesn't meet with news outlets for like 245 days, not until September of 2016. But for over 200, she's like Joe Biden before there was Joe Biden. So anyway, remember that. So AG Lynch obviously meets with Bill Clinton to let him know, wink, wink, nod, nod. Hey, I just want to let you know, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to handle it. So a few days later on July 5th, James Comey gives that infamous press conference in which he exonerates Hillary Clinton in the FBI investigation into a classified email scandal. And he effectively says, if it weren't Hillary Clinton, she'd probably be prosecuted. But, it's Hillary Clinton, so we're not going to. He said that in his little press conference. So, he says we're not going to recommend charges. We can't prove intent. And this is 3 weeks before the Democrat National Convention. And this was timed on purpose to help Hillary Clinton, to help her get out from under a bad PR scandal and actual real scandal. And it's important to note something here. It's very, very bizarre that James Comey delivered this information because he's the FBI director. He's not the Attorney General. Loretta Lynch should have given this press conference, but she did not. And it's obvious why. And James Comey later, when he was doing a press tour for his book, I know he lies about a lot, but on this, he said that's why he delivered the verdict, that Lynch was going to make it worse. They didn't want to draw attention to this tarmac meeting. They're trying to get Hillary Clinton away from scandals. So they don't want people so James Comey does it, right? And the media doesn't care. They comply and all that. Now, July is when WikiLeaks leaks the first batch of emails. And this is just before the Democrat National Convention in Philadelphia. And it was on July 22nd, they released 19,000 emails. 19,000 emails are leaked. And the Washington Post said, the emails from the Democratic National Committee include discussions of Clinton's chief rival for the presidential nomination, Senator Bernie Sanders, details of perks provided to party donors attending the convention, and email exchanges between party officials, journalists, and others. And look, we don't need to get into the specifics of all that. It doesn't matter. But, the emails that came out in that first tranche ahead of the convention, they highlighted the tension in the DNC, right? They highlighted the fact that, Clinton and the DNC were effectively conspiring against Bernie Sanders to make sure that she got the nomination and he didn't, that they were biased against Bernie Sanders. And this was obviously embarrassing for Clinton. It was embarrassing for Democrats. But a couple days later, think about this. You're Hillary Clinton. Your biggest problem is the fact that you've got this giant email scandal. And you're just, for a year, you've been bogged down on this. You finally, coordinate with the FBI and Lynch. She meets with Bill Clinton. Comey exonerates you. And you go up there, you're about to accept the nomination, and now you've got this, drop of emails that suggests that shows how, if you effectively, cheated to steal the nomination. So she finds herself in damage control yet again. But the Clintons, the Clinton campaign, Obama, the media, they decided on a new narrative this time, right? So before it was, hey, this happens. The Russians have been, hacking us forever. And also the initial reporting of the emails. Is this it? Okay, look at this. So this is from June 14th, 2016. This is what I'm talking about. The first reveal by the DNC about this hack. Russian government hackers penetrated the computer network of the Democratic National Committee and gained access to the entire database of opposition research. And this is the point. There was no suggestion that Trump was behind it. There was no suggestion that Putin was trying to help Trump. In fact, they were telling people that they got the files on Trump, potentially, on the opposition research that the Democrats had gotten a hold of. And by the way, can I make a suggestion to you? Because we're going to talk about is going to blow everyone's mind, including mine. The Clinton campaign had already been illegally using campaign funds to fund the Steele dossier by this time. We didn't get the contents of the Steele dossier until January of 2017. But Steele started getting this stuff in June or July. So they were already working on this. The Clinton campaign had already reached out to Fusion GPS months earlier to dig up dirt on Donald Trump. It was worse than that. It was very specific what they wanted to do. And we'll get into the reigning conspiracy theory I'll introduce you to, a conspiracy theory that may very well be true, but it's something that should be out there and that you should be putting out there because we need answers. But it's interesting because that's the narrative. Well, they were trying to gain opposition research. Well, the Democrats were conducting opposition research on Trump. They were paying for a Steele dossier at the time. So, one of the explanations, if that's true, is that the Democrat, look, and think about this too. Trump wasn't a traditional campaign. It wasn't centralized. He was an outsider. You couldn't hack Trump in the same way you could hack the DNC. I mean, the DNC was just, I don't know what they were doing. I mean, they didn't seem to make any changes, even though they knew they were being hacked. And I'll get into that in a minute, for a long time, because the hacking started long before, even in January. And so could the Russians have been digging around looking for their research on Donald Trump? I mean, obviously for the Russians, and one of the things that Tulsi Gabbard's report pointed out is that there was information to go anyway, either way. In fact, there was more information that the Democrats wanted Hillary Clinton to win. There was more information that the Russians wanted Hillary Clinton to win. But they want research on whoever the Russians do. So this is key. Something changes in these 2 days. So before, the narrative is the Russians hacked us and they stole opposition research. No mention of Trump. No mention of Putin's intentions or motivation. No one speculated on a motive. Now, all of a sudden, July 24th is here. The DNC, the convention's taking place. Hillary Clinton's going to accept the nomination. And these WikiLeaks emails come out. And Obama is the one who introduces the idea that Putin and Trump have some relationship. He does an interview with Savannah Guthrie, and he says, what we do know is the Russians hack our systems, not just government systems, but private systems, he said, Obama. But what the motives were in terms of the leaks and all that, I can't say directly. But what I do know is that Donald Trump has repeatedly expressed admiration for Vladimir Putin. Asked if the president was suggesting that Putin is motivated to prefer Trump in the White House, Mr. Obama said, I am basing this on what Mr. Trump himself has said. And I think that Trump's gotten pretty favorable coverage back in Russia. Now, I don't know if what I'm going to say now is true or not. I mean, I don't know the motivation. I tried to find the clip. I mean, this interview happened with Savannah Guthrie. It was the she worked for the Today Show. But if you do a search for this interview in 2016, July of 2016, it can't be found. It's not available on the Today Show. It's not available on NBC anymore. It says something like, I don't know. Go and look for this video. Savannah Guthrie, Barack Obama ahead of the Democrat National Convention, July 2016. And you will not find that video on NBC sites. And my question is, okay, is it just coincidental? Is it just been too long and this is a common practice to erase this stuff from your website? Or is NBC scrubbing this because of what's going on right now with Obama and him being in hot water? I don't know. Now, I've got one clip and one clip only to play, and that is Robert Mook, who was now the campaign manager for the Clinton campaign. Obama's gone out and introduced this idea. Well, I think Putin might want Trump to win, and that's why this is happening. Now, look at Robbie Mook. Listen to him.
What's disturbing to us is that experts are telling us that Russian state actors broke into the DNC, stole these emails, and other experts are now saying that the Russians are releasing these emails for the purpose of actually helping Donald Trump. I don't think it's coincidental that these emails were released on the eve of our convention here.
There you have it. The narrative changes again. Now Robert Mook and the campaign are officially saying, intelligence, we believe that Putin is actually doing this now to help Donald Trump. So that's Mook. And Vanity Fair uses the interview. They quote the Robert Mook there, and look at this headline. Comrade Trump's alleged Russian ties. So now Trump has Russian ties. Obama comes out. And remember Obama being first, because I'm going to come back to that moment in a second. Because look, there are layers to what's happening here. There are layers that I'm about to peel back, and our minds are going to explode. Our brains are going to explode. And I hope that Gabbard and the rest of the intelligence community and Trump will ask these questions. We'll start to look at this deeper, because this began long before Barack Obama took over and used it as a weapon to try and undermine Trump's first administration. I care as much about Hillary Clinton's role in this as Barack Obama's. I care maybe even more about what took place before Trump became president than after. Certainly as much. And I don't want people to miss this. So that's the narrative from there. And it just gets more and more desperate the closer you get to Election Day. So it's not that Russians hacked the DNC. It's not even that Putin is interfering in our elections anymore. Now it's that Trump is working with Putin to accomplish it. Trump is somehow directing this. Now here's another critical, I only said it 3 times, piece of information. We learned this years ago, but all this matters. July 26th, 2016. So Obama's out there and he's giving his interview with Savannah Guthrie, right? He's telling her that Putin and Trump may have a thing going here to try and, hurt Hillary Clinton. They're working together. You have Robbie Mook from the campaign come out and finally make a statement applying intent to Putin. And July 26, 2016, convention's happening. CIA director at the time, John Brennan, he briefs President Barack Obama on the Hillary Clinton campaign's plan to vilify Donald Trump by stirring up a scandal claiming election interference, i.e. Trump-Russia collusion, is born. We have Brennan's handwritten notes. That's where this comes from. And John Ratcliffe is the one FBI director later that declassified this. John Brennan's note said, we're getting additional insight into Russian activities from redacted site, CITE, alleged, approved by Hillary Clinton, a proposal from one of her foreign policy advisors to vilify Donald Trump by stirring up a scandal claiming interference by the Russian Security Service, which is the GRU. And you're going to see the GRU come up time and time and time again after this. The narrative, you see what the Democrats do? The notes state on 28th of July, in the margin, Brennan writes POTUS, but that section of the notes is redacted. By the way, I don't know if the unredacted's out there, but I would like to know. It should be redacted. Hello? And the notes read, any evidence of collaboration between the Trump campaign plus Russia. So now they're desperately searching to create evidence to sell this narrative to the American people. They have another scandal they're trying to deal with, and it's embarrassing for them, and they're trying to turn this against Trump. So September 2016, Hillary Clinton goes out, gives a campaign event. She's in Illinois, I believe. And she cites credible reports of Russian interference in U.S. elections. She says, I think it's quite intriguing that this activity has happened around the time Trump became the nominee. And it's been 275 days since she's held, since she's sat in front of the press. And now all of a sudden she can't wait to get in front of the press. Now she's got to be in front of the press 24/7, pushing this narrative. Quick timeline, folks. The Democrats, now we know, they need to prove something else. They're claiming that Trump is involved in all this, so they need to tie Trump to Putin. That's key. This falls apart without it. July 31st, 2016. The FBI opened its investigation of possible Trump-Russia collusion. 5 days, by the way, after Clinton allegedly hatched the plan. And if you remember the name George Papadopoulos, he's about to become relevant too, because this is the layer of the onion I'm going to peel back for you. Now let's get into some stuff here. Things that a lot of people didn't know, things that I didn't know and certainly didn't remember. September of 2016. Michael Sussman, right? Michael Sussman, he's a lawyer that works for the Clinton campaign. He works for Perkins Coie. Perkins Coie is where Mark Elias worked, right? Mark Elias, the fat Jabba the Hutt doppelganger that thinks he's going to get away with his crimes, but we're coming for you too, fat boy. Michael Sussman goes to the FBI September 2016. I told you he's a lawyer working for the Clinton campaign at Perkins Coie. And he tells the FBI person he's meeting with, hey, it's nice to meet you. Thanks for meeting me today. I am not here on behalf of the Clinton campaign. My God, that would be crazy. That would actually even be illegal. I am here as a concerned private citizen. And, I just happen to have these white papers, these research papers in front of me that are from this, this group of geeks. I don't know. Don't ask how it came in my hand, but I'm just telling you, I've got these white papers. And in this research I've just obtained, well, it shows unusual DNS traffic between a Trump organization domain and the largest bank in Russia called Alpha Bank. And these cyber geeks, they think it's worth looking into. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Take a look. Sussman lied to the FBI. He was working for the Clinton campaign. He was delivering that on behalf of the Clinton campaign, and the FBI had to have known all about it. As a matter of fact, Robbie Mook testified later because Sussman was part of the Durham investigation, and he should have gone to jail, but he got off because, these crooks always get off. But Robbie Mook actually testified, the campaign manager, he testified that the Clinton campaign had paid for and commissioned the analysis, these white papers. Ooh, DNS signals, spooky, what's going on? Well, they paid somebody to come up with that, and they were paying Sussman. And this was campaign-funded opposition research, which, of course, is a violation of campaign finance law. And the FBI, by the way, looked into this later, these white papers, these allegations, and they found the allegation was completely fabricated. In other words, just like the Steele dossier, the Clinton campaign paid a bunch of people to come up with something to make it up completely out of whole cloth. There was no covert communication between the Trump campaign and Alpha Bank. It was, Clinton paid these people to do it, to make it look like there was something going on, and there was nothing going on whatsoever. And by the way, what would that prove anyway? Have you ever asked a Democrat, by the way, what is Trump-Russia collusion? Well, Trump, he colluded with Putin to, really? Like how? What exactly did he do? Nobody can explain it. Nobody could explain it on the news. It was Trump-Russia collusion. And you have to wonder, what the level of collaboration was between the Clinton campaign, obviously, and the Obama administration. This couldn't have been done without the Obama administration. So everyone's pointing to December, whatever, this moment in which things change and Obama gets involved. Obama's involved the whole time. Obama was briefed about this, in July by James Brennan. He knows what's going on. This couldn't be possible without him. This is why I'm focused on pre-Trump victory, because everyone else is focused on post-Trump victory, which is also important. And I will focus on that next episode. Anyway, the story about the Alpha Bank, the spooky, creepy, suspect communication between the Trump org and, the Russian bank. Well, that story was given to Slate in October 31st, 2016, right? Late October surprise, desperate Hillary Clinton, was a Trump server communicating with Russia. So Slate was a part of that. The Clinton campaign fed that story to Slate as well. Now, here we go. Let's get into the Steele dossier. Things that you didn't know, things that I didn't know. Maybe some of you knew, but I doubt it. So it's October 2016. The election's in November. And the Obama administration starts spying on Carter Page. Carter Page, he's just a Trump campaign advisor, all right? And the Obama administration is using the Clinton campaign-funded Steele dossier to justify this. The FBI uses the Steele dossier in their FISA application to spy on Carter Page. And the FBI did not disclose to the judge who approved the FISA warrant. They did not disclose that Steele was biased against Trump, and they didn't disclose that the Steele dossier was paid by the Clinton administration. So the Democrats are doing this, and it's all illegal. Obama's involved. It's all illegal. The FBI, all illegal. Now, when do you think Steele started putting this dossier together? June. George Papadopoulos. Let's take a break and talk about George Papadopoulos for a minute. I'll get to the kind of conclusions in just a moment here. It won't conclude permanently, but it will set us up for the next time I sit here and we keep going with this. I think this is very, very important. We cannot let this go. We need to remember this and we need to research this. So George Papadopoulos, something is off about this to me. I am laser focused on George Papadopoulos because something stinks to high heaven and I want an answer. So Papadopoulos is a nobody. And I don't mean that as an insult to George. I just mean it's 2016. He's going to be a foreign policy advisor for the Trump campaign. Trump announces it himself in an interview on March 21st. But he's a low-level person in the Trump campaign. George is. George lives in London. Papadopoulos lives in London. And he works at this organization. It's a think tank of sorts, I believe. But it's called the London Center of International Law Practice. This is March 2016. We're going back in time now, right? So this think tank he's working for, they send him to this conference in Rome for work. It's a delegation, and they hold these meetings at Link, which I think is a university in Rome, but nonetheless, it's in Rome. It's called Link. This is March 12th, and he already knows he's going to be working for the Trump administration, even though Trump makes the announcement officially on the 21st. He knows by this time. And in Rome at Link, the Rome institution there where this meeting is taking place, he meets a guy named Joseph Mifsud. Joseph Mifsud. Mifsud lives in London. He's a professor there, I believe. And he has a senior role at this same think tank that Papadopoulos is working for. And he and Papadopoulos hit it off in Rome. So they hang out a few times when they get back to London. Mifsud meets Papadopoulos, and he lets Papadopoulos, Mifsud wants Papadopoulos to know that he's a big deal in Russia. They meet this one day, and Mifsud shows up with this young girl. And he tells Papadopoulos that the girl is Vladimir Putin's niece. She wasn't the niece. It was a lie. Why would he do that? It's not true. That wasn't Vladimir Putin's niece, but Mifsud tells Papadopoulos that look, this is. So he's like grooming, and not in the sexual way, but he's like grooming Papadopoulos for something. So hey, this is Putin's. Ooh, that's cool. Wow, this guy like knows people. I'm a foreign policy advisor to Donald Trump. Like I'm big time. Like I've hit like the jackpot here. I'm going to be useful to the Trump administration. Like these connections I'm making. Doesn't it feel like a scam to you? Like whatever. So they get breakfast another morning, and then on April 26th, right? April 26th, Mifsud tells Papadopoulos, hey, you know what, Georgie boy? I hear the Russians have dirt on Hillary Clinton, just out of the blue. They've got emails. Isn't that crazy? Wink, wink, Papadopoulos. And 6 days later, Papadopoulos meets Alexander Downer. This is key. He meets a guy named Alexander Downer at a wine bar in Kensington. Kensington, if you've ever been to London or if you haven't been to London, Kensington is a very ritzy, very wealthy part of London. And so they meet at the Kensington wine rooms, no doubt a bougie place. Alexander Downer is Australia's former high commissioner. Alexander Downer works for Australian intelligence. That's the point. And they're sitting there drinking, and Papadopoulos tells Downer that this guy has told him that the Russians have dirt on Hillary Clinton. And they go home, and he doesn't see Downer anymore, and that's the end. Downer supposedly tells the Australian intel community about Papadopoulos. And the Australian government doesn't take any action whatsoever. Not yet. Just wait. The coincidences, right? We talk about coincidences. What are the odds some of these things happen and who's actually behind them? Clinton? Maybe. All right. So look, Democrats know they've been hacked in March potentially. End of April, they hire CrowdStrike. Now, listen carefully to this. This is what CrowdStrike said about their involvement. CrowdStrike, if you're just joining me, was hired by the Clinton campaign to look into the hack that took place and to identify who was behind it, and they determined it was the Russians. So the DNC contacted CrowdStrike to respond to a suspected cyber attack impacting its network. The DNC was first alerted to the hack by the FBI in September 2015, according to testimony by DNC IT contractor Yared Tamim, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And the FBI attributed the breach to the Russian government in September. Are you asking some of the questions I'm asking here? But I thought it's June when the Democrats tell us they've been hacked by the Russians. But wait a second. The FBI knows the Russians hacked the DNC in September 2015. Excuse me? So the DNC knows in September 2015 the Russians have hacked him. That's what the FBI told them. Donald Trump is not the presidential candidate yet. People didn't know that Trump was going to be the nominee for the Republican Party until February. February, we knew it. March, Super Tuesday, he won 7 out of 10 states. March, it was like a foregone conclusion. Trump's going to be the guy. But September 2015, Nobody knew Trump had a chance at becoming president. And the FBI tells the DNC you've been hacked by the Russians. They hire CrowdStrike in April 30th. What's going on here? Just asking questions. So in April 2016, some guy decides to tell Papadopoulos that the Russians have dirt on Clinton. What are the odds of that happening? And then Papadopoulos tells someone who happens to work for Australian intelligence at a wine bar about 6 days later on May 6th that this happened. And this Australian tells his government and they sit on it until July. Why do they sit on it until July? We're coming back to it. The same day, are you ready for this? Coincidence. On the same day that Brennan told Obama about Hillary Clinton's plan to invent this scandal, create this scandal that tied Trump to Putin, on the same day that he briefed Obama, that's the same day that that's the same day that the Australian government contacted Brennan, the FBI, and said, hey, did you hear about this Papadopoulos meeting? And that's what they used to open an FBI investigation into the Trump-Russia collusion. You know what I think? I think that the Clinton campaign hatched this Trump-Russia collusion bullshit, pardon my French, way earlier than they know and we've assumed. If they knew the Russians were behind the hack, and they knew they were compromised, and they knew there was a possibility emails would be leaked, then they may have decided they needed a contingency to deal with that. And when they knew Trump would be the opponent, well, let's set George Papadopoulos up. Let's get ready. How do we save ourselves from humiliation? Let's tie it to Trump. He's behind this. And so you can see the escalation of the Trump-Russia collusion hoax. But there are all of these things that are contradictory in what the media's reported and what we know. The DNC was aware of hacks in September of 2015. They knew they were under attack. And then they wait until April to hire CrowdStrike to determine. I mean, I guess you understand the point here. I mean, based on this testimony, they knew that Russians were trying to hack them in September of 2015. So why is it a surprise, 5 months later that the Russians have hacked you? They've been trying to hack you. And so these are the questions we need to get to the bottom of. Obviously, Trump wasn't working with Putin. And that brings me to the Russiagate Explained. Other people are talking about this. I don't want to spend too long because we have already hit an hour here, over an hour. But, the Obama intelligence that happens post, Trump winning, it was equivalent to the Steele dossier. Obama told the intelligence community, a handful of people, Brennan and so on and so forth, hey, we need to make sure that we tie Donald Trump to Putin. We need to make sure that this assessment concludes that, Putin was working to elect Donald Trump. And that's why they used a small snippet of information that was interpreted 5 different ways by 5 different people as the foundation of their claim. And in this report that I encourage you to read, it's about 45 pages from Tulsi Gabbard. It shows all the information and intel that was gathered. And there's way more evidence that Putin wanted Clinton to win over Trump. There's no direct evidence that says, Putin definitely wants, Trump to win. And it doesn't make sense anyway because of the way I opened the show. Why would Putin want Trump to win when, Hillary Clinton was already compromised? When he already had dirt on her, when she had the Clinton Foundation, when she helped with Uranium One, all these scandals out there. Why? So the question that we need to ask is, how early was the Trump-Russia collusion hoax hatched? When was it actually hatched? What was Obama's role in it? I mean, we have some key moments we can point to. We can see the media's changing narrative, and it's not until, July that we start to get this change in the narrative. It escalates. And remember this too. Think about some context. The belief going into the election was that Hillary Clinton was going to win. You had a pollster that was heralded as like the greatest pollster of all time that worked out of Princeton. I don't remember his name. He was saying there was a 99% chance that Clinton was going to win. But regardless, whether it was Nate Silver, every single supposedly reputable pollster said Hillary Clinton's going to win this election. And I don't know if they were just telling themselves that because, of course, they wanted to believe that. But nonetheless, the accepted belief on the left was that Hillary Clinton was going to win. Obama was out there saying there is no way. I mean, the whole way, there is no way Trump's going to be elected because I trust the American people. President's hard work. What would Trump know about that? Me, Barack Obama, lazy OG, DEI hire everywhere I go. Yeah, I work hard. So, these are the questions I have, but that needs to be investigated as well. I mean, I guess it seems to me, if you look at the timelines, the Steele dossier, which was intended to do this, happened earlier than some of these meetings. Let me see if I put this down real quick, and then I'll close. The main thing to me is the Steele dossier, because I did not realize it started so early. Fusion GPS. Hang with me for 1 second. I'm going to pull up my computer and look it up on my notes. But I'm coming. I'm coming. Almost there. Yeah. So this is what I wanted to repeat. The Clinton campaign started their oppositional research of Trump in April of 2016. They hired Fusion GPS in April of 2016. Fusion GPS hired Christopher Steele in June of 2016. They spent $12.4 million on this. And they hid the funding because it was a campaign finance violation. So my point is, the Clinton campaign was focused on tying Trump to Russia, ostensibly, believably, credibly, in April of 2016. They went to Fusion GPS in April of 2016 and gave them a directive to invent this dossier. And they ultimately had Steele do it in June. That's before WikiLeaks leaked anything. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? How is it that the Clinton campaign had the foresight to go and hire Steele in June when WikiLeaks hadn't even leaked anything yet? They're going about this in April. And this is when Papadopoulos is set up. This is when all this is going on. So my point is, I think these mother effers knew as early as 2015 what was going on. And once they realized that Trump was going to be the nominee, they went ahead and did this. I don't know that it has anything to do as a reaction necessarily to WikiLeaks. It's possible this was a plan that had nothing to do with that. Because the only thing she was dealing with in April when they went to Fusion GPS and said, get us some crap on Trump ASAP, is the email scandal. She's dealing with the email scandal. She had not been exonerated yet. Bill Clinton had not met with AG Loretta Lynch on the tarmac yet. So this is happening well before this narrative. And so what I'm saying is maybe this plan to hatch to do the Trump-Russia collusion, maybe it was related to the email scandal, her email scandal, not the leaks. But it was her attempt at that time, not knowing exactly what was going to happen, to distract people from the email scandal. So Trump-Russia collusion was maybe born before all of this stuff happened. And maybe it was more orchestrated than people want to believe. That's what I'm saying. So anyway, that's all for today. We'll get into the rest of this next episode. I want people to understand the severity of what happened here. The seditious treason. I want to get into Obama and what the media is doing. They're gaslighting the American people now. And I want to explain and contextualize how serious this is, why this matters, why people have to pay for what they did. All right, this is Drew Allen. God bless you all. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time.